What's up, YouTube? Kid Komodo here. Buckle up, because we got some 11.3 patch notes with my genius level intellect, 6,000 IQ.
Are you okay?
Yeah, fine.
I heard you yelling about your IQ from outside.
Hey guys, welcome to Thoughts of a Hard-Stuck Silver Player. Hey, how's it going? Kid Komodo here, and welcome to my review of the 11.3 patch notes. I think overall it's a really good patch that hit a lot of what was kind of feeling overtuned the past couple of weeks. As always, I don't 100% agree with the patch notes, but I don't think I'll ever 100% agree with any of their patch notes. And we're going to start with champions. So first up is Anivia. Now, as a mid lane mage player, I have to admit that Anivia was definitely strong. A lot of burst, a lot of wave clear. Definitely as far as control mages go, was definitely S tier control mage. Now these changes here, lowering the damage of her Q and increasing the time between when she can deactivate her R and reactivate it. Neither of those are really going to kill the champion. A lot of people max W second on Anivia anyways, and so the damage reduction on the Q, you're not really going to feel if you're one of those players. Overall, she's still going to be strong, still going to have the wave clear, still going to have the damage. Most of her damage comes from her R and her E anyways, and so just removing a little bit off of the Q, it does lower her burst combo, but not to the point where she's unplayable. Same thing with Cho'Gath, not a big change here, just a little bit of damage off of his E. Again, not enough to make him unplayable. For Elise is our first champion where these feel like pretty significant nerfs, especially given the fact that she was also nerfed pretty heavily in 11.2. So it's back-to-back patches of Riot really toning down her power. I personally don't see that many Elises, but Riot obviously thinks that she's pretty strong at the moment. Ezreal, he has been struggling a little bit. I mean, if you think about all the AD carries that you would pick before you picked Ezreal. You've got Jhin, Kai'Sa, Xayah, Tristana, Vayne, Aphelios, Senna. I mean, all of these AD carries that are considered more meta or more viable than Ezreal is at the moment. And that's saying something because Ezreal has the most safety and the most mobility of all the AD carries. And so it's very rare for him to be out of the meta. And when he is out of the meta, it means it's because he's pretty weak. So I don't think 10% extra AD ratio on his Q is going to vault him up to the top of the tier list, but I definitely think it's going to make a difference because of how often you use the Q. And so I definitely think he'll feel pretty strong. Definitely enough to compete with like the second tier of AD carries, like the Xayah Tristana range. Somewhere in there, I think he'll kind of fall in there. Next is Ivern. For those of you who know me, for those of you who watch my stream or ask me questions, you know that I have thought that Ivern has been secret OP for a long time. He's getting pretty much a triple nerf this patch. They're lowering his health per level. They're also lowering his shield amount, and something we'll get to later, they are nerfing Staff of Flowing Water. Next is Jinx. Jinx being one of the more... I mean, most AD carries are hyper carries, but Jinx is kind of up there as far as like a hyper carry. Between the speed that she gets from her passive on takedowns, the range, the damage, the attack speed, she can be a very scary champion. And so with them increasing the range of her rockets and decreasing the attack speed penalty of her rocket form. She's really going to be launching those rockets a lot faster and a lot further than she was before. She's also getting a quality of life change to her chompers. I think Jinx, again, kind of like Ezreal, will kind of climb up into that second tier of AD carries. Next is Karma. I personally don't really think Karma needed a buff. They're saying here that they are buffing support Karma, but honestly, both of these changes also benefit top lane Karma, reducing the mana cost of the Q and giving more mana regen. Sure, yeah, that helps support Karma, but anyone who has gone top lane and has gone against support Karma in the top lane or tank Karma in the top lane, you're probably not going to be too excited about the champion receiving buffs. I know over in, I can't remember if it was the Korean pro scene or the Chinese pro scene, they have had some Karma tops. And so this is not going to do anything to dissuade that. I think, we'll definitely still be seeing Karma top lane. I have not been seeing a lot of Mordekaiser. I think that the old Leandries was such a good item on him, and he really can't build the new Leandries because it gives too many stats that he doesn't need. So Mordekaiser definitely took a hit in that regard. They're also, in my opinion, nerfing Riftmaker. I know they're just saying that they're changing Riftmaker, but it looks like a nerf to me, honestly. And so I don't think that reducing the cooldown of his E is going to really help him that much when they're nerfing Riftmaker. Next is Olaf. Olaf has been way too strong for a month straight now. He got nerfed last patch. The healing, his self-healing got nerfed last patch. It was not enough. So now they're nerfing his health. They're also nerfing the bonus attack speed he gets from his passive. And they're nerfing Ravenous, Gore Drinker, and Sterix Gauge. And so between the item nerfs, the champion nerfs, and the nerfs from 11.2, I think Olaf will finally be in a much more balanced state. It was getting pretty old seeing Olaf either picked or banned in every single game. Next up is Pantheon. Pantheon has been at the top of mid lane for a while. I don't know how many of you keep track of like Lolalytics, sites like that kind of provide statistic-based analysis of champions. Pantheon has been at the top of mid lane for a while. I really don't think this is going to do much to remove that. Because you max Pantheon's Q first, you really aren't going to feel this nerf for very long. By the time you hit level 9, it's going to be back to how it was before the patch. Plus the fact that they are buffing Eclipse, which I know a lot of Pantheons have been building Gore Drinker, but Eclipse is also a good option on him. Because they're buffing Eclipse and this nerf really isn't going to hit him that hard, I think Pantheon will definitely still be strong. I don't think this is going to do much. Jungle, yes, you can argue that jungle, he'll definitely feel weaker because it'll have reduced, his Q will have reduced damage and a longer cooldown. So his clear will definitely not be as strong. But as far as mid lane Pantheon goes, this really isn't going to do much to like take him down at all. Next is Rammus. Rammus has felt strong starting last patch because of the changes to the tank mythic items. They reduced the cost of the non-Sunfire tank mythics. And so Rammus definitely got a lot of benefit from that, from the Kim Tank or Kim, I think it's Kim Tank something or other. Has kind of been his go-to mythic for the last couple of weeks, and it's really helped him become more viable in the jungle. Increasing his taunt duration or taunt cooldown, I think, is good. It doesn't take away from what makes Rammus unique, which is that like Powerball speed. but it does help make him feel less oppressive by increasing the cooldown of the taunt. This one, I personally would have liked to see Rel actually receive a nerf. Here, all they did was just do some balances and adjustments to her abilities and ratios. Rel has been a very high priority support pick in almost every major competitive region. And normally, I'm surprised there wasn't a nerf here, because normally when a champion is that prevalent across the major regions, it usually means they're a little too strong. And I think Rel is in that category. Maybe I think maybe Riot is not nerfing her because she's new and they want to see her in the competitive scene, and they probably think people like you and I want to see her in the competitive scene as well, just because she is new. But I definitely think she could have used a little bit of a nerf, whether it was like the duration of her CC or the tankiness. I think she needed something. Riven, this is kind of similar to Mordekaiser. I think because they're nerfing Gore Drinker, they're nerfing Ravenous Hydra, they're nerfing Sterix Gauge. Because they're nerfing items that Riven likes to build, I don't think that this change is going to be enough. It's kind of like taking one step forward, one step back. I don't think it's really going to bring Riven back into the meta, but I'm honestly okay with that. Whenever Riven is really strong, she tends to dominate the top lane meta because she kills squishies, she kills tanks, she has CC, shielding, all of that. Damage, obviously. So I am honestly okay with a world in where Riven is not that strong. Seraphine, again, same boat as Anivia. She's been strong in mid and support for quite a while. With how much utility she brings between her ultimate and her root, stun, damage, all of that, she definitely did feel overtuned. I love, I love that they're not targeting her damage. I love that they're not really taking anything away from what she can do in the mid lane. They're targeting her defensive counterplay and they're targeting her team play. And I think that is perfect. I think that it, between the changes here to her shield on the W and her passive, along with the nerf to Staff of Flowing Water, I think that'll really kind of push her down the priority list in the support role. But it doesn't take too much away from what she does in mid lane. That's primarily where I play her, as mid lane. And I am very impressed with the way that Riot chose to change Seraphine. I think that this is a great example of how they need to balance champions going forward. And I think that they did a really good job here of focusing not so much on what makes her unique with the CC and the R and all of that, and instead focusing on like excess power elsewhere. They can kind of trim away that excess power so that she still feels like the same champion. So good job, Riot. A plus. Shyvana, I play AP Shyvana. Whenever I get autofilled in the jungle, AP Shyvana is one of my go-tos. And so to see them giving more love to AP Shyvana is a lot of fun, in my opinion. And I like that they didn't do it by just like making Fireball stronger, whatever. It's like now that she has an AP ratio on her Q, she can jump in, she can fireball, but instead of just fireballing, waiting 6 seconds, and then fireballing again, you can actually do damage with your Q. It's going to help her clear speed. Just makes the champion feel more multi-dimensional instead of just a fireball bot. Also getting extra movement speed on the W. Also, what's the word? Indirectly helps with her clear speed because she can move from camp to camp faster. So not only does she do more damage to camps, she can actually get to those camps faster. So I think this is another good change for AP Shyvana without making her just do more damage on her fireball. Singed was briefly in the meta when Imperial Mandate was very strong, and now that Imperial Mandate is no longer as strong, Singe kind of has been banished back to the shadows. I mean, don't get me wrong. A 90% AP ratio is high. That is a very high AP ratio. And so most Singe builds don't really take advantage of that because you're kind of you're going like Rylai's, but you're also going Dead Man's Plate, and you're going this like hybrid build that doesn't really take advantage of this high AP ratio. But for those of you who are bold enough or brave enough to build like full AP Singed, 90% is a pretty high ratio. And so if you're going like Leandry's, Rylai's, Demonic, I mean, your poison is going to hurt. Now, yeah, sure, you'll be squishier, but the poison though. All right, next up we have Silas. I'm kind of worried about Silas buffs. I don't think he was really in that bad of a spot. He definitely had team comps that you would pick Silas, especially if you saw like a Twisted Fate on the enemy team. You pick Silas because you're able to bully Twisted Fate in lane, but you're also able to match his R. So whenever Twisted Fate casts his R to go bot or top, you can steal it from him and follow him. And so I definitely think Silas had like a role in the meta. I think these changes is basically a triple buff. A mana reduction on his Q, a base damage increase on a W, and an increase on the ratio for the W. And so I definitely think this puts Silas in a very strong position because, like I said, he was not weak before this. I think he was in a decent spot before this, and so these buffs are definitely going to make him feel pretty strong. Talia, kind of like Olaf, was another one of those junglers that you just saw every single game because she is so strong. She has great wave clear, great CC, gank potential, movement speed, all of that. And so the changes here, I honestly don't think they're going to dissuade people from playing Talia. Sure, maybe she won't clear her camps as quickly because they're reducing the Q damage to monsters, but they're also giving back a lot of her movement speed from her passive. And so she may not clear the camp as quickly, but she can get from camp to camp faster. It also increases her ability to get across the map for ganks. Because the Q damage is not being reduced against champions, it's only being reduced against monsters. And so her gank speed and her travel speed is going to be even faster than it was before. And so I think Talia I think Talia is going to be just as strong this patch as she was last patch. Udyr is another champion that we've been seeing a lot of recently with the changes to the tank mythics and Kim tank and all of that. It has helped Udyr quite a bit. I would say that in professional play or high elo play, Udyr isn't quite as oppressive because you're usually more coordinated at that level, but definitely in like mid elo, low elo, Udyr has felt pretty strong because there just isn't as much coordination, and he excels in chaos. And so this change, I mean, 25 damage on the R, Phoenix stance, whatever. It's not really going to change what Udyr does currently. Last one's Vladimir. Vladimir is another one that has kind of felt a little out of place with the new season. The new items, like Rocket Belt, is pretty good, but he's kind of just felt out of place this season. All right. Next up, we have items. A lot of the mage items did feel pretty strong, but the only one they're really nerfing is Lichbane. Now, Lichbane gives movement speed. It also empowers your next auto attack after a spell, and it definitely did feel strong, especially in combination with either Ludens or Night Harvester. So I can definitely see why they're nerfing the item a little bit. I mean, the item's still going to be good, so I wouldn't worry about it. It's just going to be more balanced. Next is Horizon Focus. I'm actually very surprised that they're buffing Horizon Focus. I have been building a lot of Horizon Focus on like Lux, Vel'Koz, Xerath, Ahri, champions like that. You go Luden's Horizon Focus, Luden's Horizon Focus, and they synergize really well and do quite a bit of damage. And so for them to buff that item, I'm honestly surprised. Now, I mean, as a mid lane mage player, I'll definitely take it. But I think the change was unwarranted. I think the item was fine. I think that people just don't build the item as much as Riot wants them to build it. And so they're buffing it to kind of encourage people to build it. And then maybe they'll nerf it back to where it was once people realize how strong it is. This change for Verdant Barrier, I think, is a very nice change. It's going to stack the same way Seeker's Arm Guard does now. So instead of having to wait every 60 seconds for your magic resistance to go up, now you just have to kill minions and it'll stack just like Seeker's does. Banshee's Veil, they are increasing the cost, but they're also increasing the ability power. I think that change is fine. Banshee's Veil is built pretty commonly. You've got champions like LeBlanc and Syndra and Zoe, where it's like you pretty much have to build a Banshee's Veil against those champions. I would say there gets to a certain point in a game where gold is useless because you're full build or whatever. Gold eventually becomes useless, whereas ability power does not. And so if you have to pay an extra 300 gold for permanent increase in stats, I think that's worth it. And so I would say that's a good change for Banshees, especially because of how commonly it's built. I would be happy to pay an extra 300 gold for more ability power to have for the rest of the game. Changes to Seekers and Zhonya's. Now, Seekers was also nerfed. I can't remember if it was 11.2 or 11.1. It was nerfed to give less ability power, I believe. And now this patch, they are increasing the cost. I will say Seekers was maybe a little too efficient of an item. And so reducing the ability power and increasing the cost is probably warranted. Now, into matchups like Zed, Talon, Yone, Yasuo, it's going to feel kind of bad, especially as like a squishy mage, but I think the item will probably feel more balanced now. Whereas before, you could just, on your first back, drop 900 gold on a Seekers, and then you had much less of a concern going into like a Zed lane or a Talon lane, just with 900 gold. So I can definitely see why they made the change. Enchanter's items, so we already kind of touched on this a little bit as far as Staff of Flowing Water. I think they could have nerfed it a little bit more, to be honest. The interaction between Moonstone and Staff of Flowing Water is very strong right now, and 10 ability power, I mean, that's not going to do a whole bunch, to dissuade that interaction. So, we'll see. I think that combination is still going to be strong for sure. This change to Chemtech is actually a very interesting change to me because it's good for a lot of champions, but it's also bad for a lot of champions. Champions like Brand or Xerath or Vel'Koz, even Vigar, a lot of these more off-meta support picks that had immobilization abilities in their kit will no longer be able to access the 60% grievous wounds. Now, the nice thing about Chemtech for a support is it was cheaper, it had mana regen, and it had ability haste. All of these things make it, in my opinion, a better item choice over Morellonomicon for supports. Now, I'm not sure that'll be the case anymore because now it's geared more towards enchanters, your Karmas, your Lulus, your Namis, all of those champions that can heal or shield. They're going to benefit a lot more from this change. Whereas now on a champion like Xerath or Brand, you're having to decide, okay, do I want the better stats from Chemtech because I like mana regen, I like ability haste, I like all those things. Do I want those stats, but I'm capped at 40% grievous wounds? Or do I want to pay more for Morella Nomicon so that I can have 60% grievous wound? And it'll probably depend game to game on which one you get. But for very specific mage champions, this change is pretty much a nerf, which is sad. Fighter items, Silvermere Dawn. I can honestly say I do not think I have ever built nor seen this item built since the new season started. I think it builds out of QSS, if I am remembering correctly, but I've never seen anyone build it. So I'm guessing that's why they're buffing it, is because no one builds it. So I mean, an attack damage increase and a health increase will definitely feel good, especially if you need QSS. That'll feel good. Iron Spike Whip changes. I like this change. A lot of champions with limited wave clear were buying Iron Spike Whip to like supplement their wave clear in ways that they weren't really supposed to have. Like Pyke, the Pyke mid lane, what made him so strong was his ability to do damage to CC and to wave clear, because his E used to do damage to everything and not just champions. So there were Pykes that were buying Iron Spike Whip to help with their wave clear, where that's kind of what keeps Pyke balanced, is the fact that he doesn't have. So I like this change. And then I obviously will get into the Gourd Drinker changes a little bit further down. Marksman items. I like the Phantom Dancer change. Phantom Dancer had way too much attack speed. 85% attack speed when it was fully stacked. Unless you were running Lethal Tempo or Hail of Blades, you just and you could like exceed the attack speed cap, you didn't need 85% attack speed. And so I think removing some of that attack speed and putting that into attack damage will be a good change. I think it'll cause the item to be built more often. I'm going to skip Shield Bow for a second because I have a lot to say about Shield Bow. And we're going to cover Lord Doms real quick. I like that they're doing this. Mages have always had access to Void Staff, which is a 40% magic penetration item, whereas attack damage champions usually were capped at like 25% with LDR. So now that they're getting closer to that Void Staff range of the 40%, I think this is a good change. I think it is a fair change that AD champions will kind of have their own version of Void Staff. Shield Bow. I am not sold on a Shield Bow buff, especially a double Shield Bow buff. Shield Bow, in my opinion, is supposed to be a niche item. It's not supposed to be an item that you build every game, in every team comp, on every AD carry. It's supposed to be an item where you're in Champ Select, you look at the enemy team, and it's like Nautilus, Malphite, Zed, and you're like, well, yeah, I need a Shield Bow. But I think with these changes, along with the fact that they've already nerfed Gale Force in the previous patch, I feel like Shield Bow is just going to kind of be an every game default option for AD carries. And that really wasn't ever the point of the item. The point of the item was like, hey, do you need to survive something? Build Shield Bow. But now it's just going to be so strong and so efficient of an item that I feel like most AD carries are just going to build it every game, which kind of lowers the diversity of the game. Not to mention the fact that it's a buff to Yone and Yasuo. And so be prepared to see those two champions even more than you already do. Now we get to the good stuff. Gourd Drinker changes. I think the vast majority of people are very happy that Gourd Drinker is getting nerfed. I honestly probably would have nerfed it more than this. I probably would have gone for 6% missing health instead of 8. I think the item is just way too strong, especially in big 5v5 team fights on, Renekton, Aatrox, Pantheon, Olaf, whatever. They're in the middle of 5 people healing from 10 HP to full. But I'll take whatever nerf I can get on this item, to be honest. And they're lowering Omnivamp and healing across the board on a lot of items. Overall, from like an effective HP standpoint, this is a nerf to Riftmaker, kind of what I was talking about earlier when we were covering Mordekaiser. Yes, you have more HP, but because the Omnivamp was reduced by so much, your effective HP is actually lower. Um, and so I think that's going to hit certain champions, whether you were building it on a Kali or Mordekaiser. I think you're definitely going to feel that change. They're buffing Eclipse. I would say it's a 20% increase to the Eclipse shield or a 2% decrease in the Omnivamp. I would take that trade off every time on champions like Zed, Pantheon, Graves, Kha'Zix, whatever. I would take a 20% increase on my shield if I had to give up a 2% decrease on my Omnivamp. So I consider it a buff to Eclipse, and I think a lot of champions will appreciate that. Again, reducing the Omnivamp on Ravenous Hydra. The interaction of Gore Drinker and Ravenous Hydra is just way too strong. Being able to activate your Gore Drinker and then activate the cleave on Ravenous Hydra, plus all the healing and Omnivamp and all of that, it was just too strong. Also nerfing Sterix Gauge, another very strong item that provided a lot of healing, a lot of tankiness, damage, all of that. So definitely a warranted change in my opinion. Now nerfing all 3 of those items together is really going to hit certain champions like Aatrox and Olaf because they were building 2, if not all 3 of those items. And so I think it's going to bring in a slightly new meta, which I'm excited about. I was really tired of seeing Gore Drinker, Sterix Gauge every game on every bruiser. It just got boring. Next up, we've got some tank changes. Force of Nature, I think they're solidifying Force of Nature as like the dead man's plate of magic resist items. So I think increasing the movement speed there is fine. Nerfing Dead Man's Plate, I think, was definitely warranted because of the buff that they gave to Kim Tank. I think that they either needed to revert the buff on Kim Tank or they needed to nerf Dead Man because the 2 items together were just too strong. And last but not least, we have Frozen Heart. I don't see a ton of Frozen Hearts, to be honest. But I think with this change here, it's going to become it's a buff for tank supports, whether it's Rel, Leona, Nautilus, Thresh, Alistar. I think that because support is such a low income role, you're going to welcome a 200 gold decrease in the price. So I do think that you're going to start to see this item pop up more on supports. I don't love tank support meta, to be honest. I don't like tank meta at all. Tank top, tank support. I don't want tanks. No tanks. But I do think this change is beneficial to those tank supports, and you're definitely going to start seeing the item more often. Like I said at the top, overall, I think it's a solid patch. I like that they're really hitting hard on Gore Drinker, Sterix, Ravenous, all of that. I think it was definitely needed. If you guys agree with what I'm saying, disagree with what I'm saying, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you have ideas for how I can present this information to you, in a more entertaining format, definitely let me know. I do have some ideas, but I'm not too sure what direction I want to go. If I want to make these reviews more meme-tastic or funny, because a lot of this information can be kind of cut and dry, and so I definitely want to make it more entertaining for you guys while still giving you all the information that you need. So I'm kind of brainstorming in that regard, and so that's why for this one we kind of just went with like the standard cut and dry kind of style. But we'll keep brainstorming and kind of figure out a different way to do the patch notes. If you're new to the channel or if you just haven't had a chance to do it yet, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys for all the support, for stopping by to watch. And I think that's everything. See you guys in the next one.